Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into something vital for any team or organization: psychological safety.
Yeah, it's a term we hear a lot.
Exactly. And we're looking at a piece from Phoenix Performance Partners called Creating Safe Spaces, Building Psychological Safety in Your Organization.
And what really stands out in their work, I think, is how they nail down this common struggle.
Which is,
Well, it's a gap, right?
Mm.
Between leaders knowing about psychological safety as like a concept and actually creating it. They use this great example of a healthcare executive team. Super smart people, they totally understood the theory, but well, innovation was stalling, people were leaving.
Because they were afraid to speak up or make a mistake.
Precisely. That's the disconnect they highlight. Knowing isn't the same as doing.
Right. It's like knowing all the rules of driving doesn't automatically make you a good driver in practice.
Exactly. So our mission today really is to get beyond the buzzword,
Uh-huh.
to understand what it truly means, and crucially, how you can practically build it.
And it's so important. I mean, they mention Google's Project Aristotle findings.
Oh yeah, that's landmark stuff.
It showed psychological safety wasn't just, a nice to have. It was the #1 predictor of high-performing teams. More than talent, more than experience.
Number one. That really makes you stop and think, doesn't it?
It really does.
And Phoenix Performance Partners, they ground this whole thing really well in the neuroscience, how our brains actually work.
You mean the threat detection system, the
Oh,
amygdala?
exactly that.
Yeah.
That sort of primal part of the brain that's always scanning for danger. If there's no psychological safety, that system is basically on high alert all the time.
I found that fascinating, especially the anecdote they shared. The executive whose team thought his frown meant disapproval.
Right. Just a facial expression, but interpreted as a threat.
It shows how sensitive we are to those cues when we feel potentially unsafe.
Totally. And it's not people being overly sensitive, it's biology kicking in. Survival mode, essentially.
So, what are the consequences when that threat system is always sort of humming in the background?
Well, the piece lays it out clearly. Your cognitive resources, your brain power get eaten up by just trying to stay safe.
Less room for problem solving then.
Way less. Less creativity, too. Your focus narrows, so you miss opportunities you might otherwise see.
Okay.
Learning gets impaired, memory formation suffers, and collaboration. That takes a hit because everyone's kind of looking out for number one. Self-preservation takes over.
So, creating psychological safety isn't just about making people feel good, it's about enabling their brains to actually function optimally.
That's it. It's about creating the conditions for better thinking, faster learning, and real teamwork, not just surface-level politeness.
Which requires some fundamental shifts in mindset, according to the source.
Yes, they talk about several key transformations needed within the organization's culture.
Like moving from retribution.
To safety, yeah. Meaning, genuinely, people won't be punished for speaking up, for asking tough questions, or, importantly, for making honest mistakes.
That seems foundational. And they link it to the growth mindset too, right?
Absolutely. Shifting from a fixed mindset, this idea that abilities are set in stone, to a growth mindset, believing people can develop and learn.
Because if you think any mistake proves you're incompetent.
You'll just play it safe, you won't take risks, and innovation needs risk.
Makes sense. What other shifts do they highlight?
Moving from judgmentalism towards elevation. So instead of immediately criticizing, you're actively looking for potential and figuring out how to support people's growth.
I like that term, elevation.
Me too. Then there's the shift from exclusion to inclusion, really valuing diverse viewpoints, not just ticking a box.
Actively seeking them out.
Right. And finally, moving from conventional thinking to creativity, encouraging people to take intellectual risks, to challenge the status quo.
These are big shifts, and they stress it's not about just saying these things.
Not at all. It's about consistent behaviors, day in, day out. That's what truly signals safety. Intentions are fine, but actions speak louder.
So how do leaders translate this into action? They talk about 4 pillars.
Yes, the 4 pillars identified by Phoenix Performance Partners. The first one is leader vulnerability.
Okay, vulnerability. That can feel counterintuitive for some leaders.
It can, but it's critical. When leaders model vulnerability, like admitting they don't know something or they made a mistake or asking for help, it gives permission for others to do the same.
It humanizes them.
Exactly. It shatters that myth of the infallible leader. They share the story of Brad, one of their co-founders.
About his anxiety and depression.
Yeah, and seeking support. That kind of openness demonstrates that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's actually strength. It builds trust.
Okay, so leader vulnerability is pillar 1. What's next?
Pillar 2 is active appreciation.
So saying thank you.
Well, yes, but more than that. It's about consciously creating a positive feedback environment. The ratio of positive to negative interactions needs to be significantly skewed towards the positive.
And not just generic praise, I assume.
Definitely not. They emphasize specific, genuine appreciation. Like, that question you asked really helped us clarify things, or I really appreciate how you handled that tricky customer situation.
Got it. Specificity makes it meaningful. It shows you're actually paying attention.
Precisely. It lands much better. Pillar 3 is response to failure.
This feels like a big one. How an organization reacts when things go wrong.
It's huge. It's probably one of the clearest signals of whether it's truly safe or not. Is a mistake a learning opportunity, or is it time to find someone to blame?
They contrast the questions asked, don't they?
Yeah. In a safe place, it's what happened, what did we learn, how do we improve? In a blame culture, it's whose fault is this, why didn't they stop it, how do we punish them?
Worlds apart.
Completely. And that healthcare organization example with the failure forums.
Where leaders discuss their own mistakes.
Right. They created a space for it. And guess what? Error reporting went up. Not because more errors were happening, but because people felt safe to report them.
Which allowed them to fix underlying systemic issues.
Exactly. That's the power of handling failure constructively.
Okay, so vulnerability, appreciation, response to failure. What's the 4th pillar?
Decision transparency.
Meaning
people need to understand how and why decisions are made. If decisions seem arbitrary or like they come down from on high with no explanation.
that creates anxiety, a feeling of lack of control.
Absolutely. So transparency involves things like clarifying the decision-making process beforehand, explaining the rationale afterwards, acknowledging constraints or trade-offs.
Being honest about uncertainty, too.
Yes, even that. Just bringing people into the loop, explaining the why behind the what. It builds trust and reduces that feeling of things happening to you.
Okay, those 4 pillars give a strong framework. But how do you weave this into the day-to-day fabric of a team?
Right, because it's not a one-off workshop. Phoenix Performance Partners emphasizes consistent practices. They break it down into daily, weekly, and organizational levels.
Let's start with daily. What can teams do every day?
Simple things, often. Like starting meetings with a quick check-in. How are you doing? Or what's your main focus today?
Just connecting on a human level first.
Yeah. And maybe ending meetings with an appreciation round, acknowledging someone's contribution.
Nice.
Normalizing saying, I don't know. Making it okay to not have the answer and encouraging questions.
Takes the pressure off.
Definitely. Using yes and. Thinking to build on ideas rather than shutting them down. And crucially, having norms for addressing tension or disagreement directly and respectfully.
Not letting things fester.
Exactly. Those small daily actions build the foundation.
Okay, what about weekly practices?
Things like dedicated learning rounds, sharing something you learned, maybe even a mistake, and the lesson from it.
Building on that response to failure idea.
Right. Cross-functional shadowing can build empathy. Regular recognition rituals, celebrating small wins and progress, not just the huge victories.
Keeping momentum.
And structured feedback exchanges, creating regular, safe opportunities for people to give and receive feedback.
So it becomes normal, not scary.
That's the goal. And then there are the broader organizational practices.
Like surveys.
Yeah, regular psychological safety surveys measure it, discuss the results, track progress, having formal learning from failure processes across the organization.
Systematizing it.
Idea incubation programs giving people space to try new things without high stakes, encouraging cross-hierarchical dialogues, breaking down silos, and even innovation rewards that recognize the attempt, not just the successful outcome.
Rewarding the courage to try.
Exactly.
So you mentioned surveys. How else can you actually measure if this stuff is working? It feels a bit intangible.
It can feel that way, but Phoenix Performance Partners argues you can measure it. Surveys are one way, asking direct questions.
Like?
Things like, how comfortable do you feel expressing an honest opinion, even if it differs from the group? Or, do you feel able to take risks on this team? Is it safe to admit mistakes? Can you acknowledge not knowing something without fear?
Okay, direct questions.
And questions about valuing diverse perspectives. But you can also look at behavioral indicators.
What sorts of behaviors?
Well, error reporting rates, like we discussed. Are they going up or staying hidden? Look at meeting dynamics. Who talks? Is it just a few people, or is participation widespread?
Ah, okay. Distribution of voice.
Yeah. How often are people asking questions? Are new ideas being submitted? How freely does information flow up, down, and across the hierarchy? These are all observable signs.
That makes it more concrete. Now, implementing this, it's not always smooth sailing, right? What are common challenges?
Definitely not always smooth. They point out a few common ones. Middle manager resistance is a big one.
Why them specifically?
They're often caught in the middle, feeling pressure from above and below. They might feel vulnerable themselves. The advice is, build psychological safety for them first. Let them experience it before asking them to create it for their teams.
Okay, help them feel safe first. What else?
Mistaking politeness for safety. Where everyone's nice, but there's no real challenge or debate. Artificial harmony.
So avoiding conflict isn't the goal.
No, the goal is productive conflict. So you need to differentiate and teach people how to disagree constructively.
Right. And inconsistency.
Huge issue. If leaders say one thing but do another, it erodes trust fast. The key is feedback mechanisms, ways to gently point out when a leader's impact doesn't match their intent.
Holding up a mirror, essentially.
In a constructive way, yes.
Well,
And finally, cultural differences. What feels safe in one cultural context might not in another. So you need to involve diverse perspectives in defining what safety looks like here.
that makes sense. It needs to be context specific.
Absolutely.
So assuming you navigate the challenges, how do you make this stick? How do you make it sustainable?
Good question. It needs continuous effort. Phoenix Performance Partners suggests embedding it right from the start in onboarding for new people.
Setting the tone early.
Exactly. Provide ongoing training, not just a one-off. Recognize and celebrate the people who actively champion safety, your safety champions.
Make them visible.
Yes. And address violations. If someone undermines safety, it needs to be addressed promptly and transparently. Otherwise, the standards erode.
Actions have consequences, positive and negative.
Right. And finally, consciously renew the commitment. Maybe during team retreats or annual planning. Keep it top of mind.
It really sounds like an ongoing process, a journey.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And the payoff, as the source strongly argues, is enormous. In a world that changes so fast, having people who feel safe to think creatively, take smart risks, and learn constantly, that's not just nice, it's your core competitive advantage.
It really frames it as essential for thriving, not just surviving.
Definitely. It leads to that final, quite provocative question they pose to the reader, to you listening. Are you going to actively create the conditions for psychological safety, or are you going to settle for less?
That really puts the onus on leadership, doesn't it? To choose to build this.
It does. Because, as they say, the organizations that thrive long-term will be the ones where people feel safe enough to bring their full intelligence and energy to work. It's becoming a necessity.
A powerful closing thought. And if people want to explore more from Phoenix Performance Partners,
They have a newsletter, Elevate Your Culture, and you can find them on LinkedIn. Lots of good insights there on leadership and building these kinds of cultures.
excellent. Well, thanks for digging into this with me. It's clear that building psychological safety is complex, but absolutely critical work.
Agreed. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.